What's up guys, Houndish here, and today we're jumping in with more Destiny 2 updates, some news, and who knows, maybe a bit of drama in the mix too. First up, Call to Arms has gone live this week. It's a very rewarding event for most players, but there's a pretty significant issue with scoring in terms of the competitive aspect for the event. Bungie recognised some feedback about that and promised some changes, so we'll touch on it. Otherwise, we've had a preview of weapon changes coming up in Renegades. Bungie confirmed that we'll get a separate abilities preview. There's also an indication that Guardian ranks will reset in Renegades, so we'll talk about what that means. And we have a few other things to round up, so as always guys, I hope you find this one interesting, and if you do, a rating very much helps us out. But now, let's get into it. First things first, Call to Arms is now live. In terms of the event in general, if you're looking to level up, catch up on picking up weapons and things like that, it actually is incredibly rewarding, really, especially compared to how things were a couple of months back before the power leveling changes. So if you're looking to level up, it's certainly a good way to do it, but there's also the competitive aspect of this event, where getting a top 10% score in a couple of activities will grant us the new Universal Helmet ornament. I noticed a problem with this almost immediately though, especially comparing my score in the salt mines versus my friends. It was apparent that power level plays into this, so I jumped in a fire team of 3 players who were at different power levels. I'm like 480. The top player was 550, that's my friend Duddits. We completed the same activity. Me and Duddits actually got the same amount of kills, essentially the same score, but with the power leveling system, because I am a lower power level, I automatically get less points. Unfortunately, it's a pretty significant delta between the point scores, so for the same activity and essentially the same performance, I get 5 points, but Duddits gets 50 points. And that does basically mean that if you're below 550 power, you are competing against players who are at 550. And even if your performance is essentially the same, they can post significantly higher scores because of their power level. So that's going to lock a lot of players out from actually earning the competitive rewards. Bungie have said, "We've been watching the feedback and conversation around rewards, activities, and modifiers for the event. Expect details on some changes based on your feedback in the coming days. In the meantime, be sure to claim your daily shipment of gear from Devrim in the tower, and earning competitive points in Call to Arms activities will increase how many rewards you receive." So it's still rewarding in terms of general loot, but I'm assuming Bungie are recognizing the power level influence there, and hopefully they have plans to change it, because this is a general trend that I just don't like with the new systems in Destiny, where difficulty and accomplishment in activities is less recognized than the rest of your investment into the game. That's the way that gear tiers work, but now with this event, it's the same again. I think there is value to actually rewarding players for their time invested, but when it comes to anything competitive, or that's actually about ability, I think it sucks when pre-existing power investment is the main factor. So hopefully Bungie can change that. I want that Universal Helmet ornament, but I'm not grinding to 550 just to get it. And I'm sure many players will feel the same. I'm sure as well, some players will say, "Why aren't you max power level?" And my main reason would be that I just don't think it's good game design for everything you do to be influenced by your power level. But you'll have to give me your thoughts below. I'll keep you posted if Bungie give us any further details. Another thing related to Call to Arms here, but some players have been seeing tier 6 weapons and armor drop. Now, these aren't really tier 6, but they say they are. They have an extra diamond or dot on the icon, and this one actually reads that it's a tier 6 weapon, although it doesn't describe the benefits of being tier 6. I'm not sure why this is happening. I'm guessing it's just a bug, but could it point towards Bungie potentially introducing tier 6 in some capacity in the future? I guess that is possible, but for the moment, it's anybody's guess. And yes, just to confirm, it is an entirely visual bug. Otherwise, this week, we got the sandbox preview for weapons, and we'll touch on that in just a couple of moments. Importantly though, Bungie have separately said they are planning to publish a separate article regarding ability changes, so that's another one we can look forward to very soon. Something else related to the new Warlock exotic, the Domo Suffusion, Bungie added to the TWID from last week and said, this originally said it would suspend combatants, but it will actually suspend both combatants and players. So you'll be able to use it in PvP, that could be annoying. Casting a Rift, of course, will suspend nearby allies when a Strand Super is equipped, and suspend deals damage over time as well, which heals the player in the process. And with the fact that combatants who break free from suspension suffer additional damage, that definitely will be interesting for PvP if it applies, so give me your thoughts about that below. Something separate here related to Renegades, but I noticed this in the known issues list. The current Guardian rank countdown incorrectly indicated that they would actually reset with Ash and Iron. Importantly for Renegades though, current Guardian ranks will persist until Renegades releases was the wording, so on that basis it seems very possible Guardian ranks will actually refresh with Renegades. To an extent that isn't necessarily surprising, unless of course Bungie have walked back this change already. We'll have to wait for a further announcement, but obviously we are carrying our power forward to Renegades, another component of gear tiering and everything everything though is of course Guardian rank, so I'm not sure how that will impact rewards earned in Renegades, but one to watch out for, and I'll keep you posted when Bungie give us details. The other thing from the news this week, but of course with Sony's recent earnings or financial reports, they commented on Destiny 2 and Bungie in general. And I guess the headline is that the level of sales and user engagement for D2 have not reached the expectations that Sony had at the time of the acquisition of Bungie, and that they'll continue to make improvements, but have downwardly revised the business projection for the time being and recorded an impairment loss against a portion of assets of Bungie. Which basically means they're changing their valuation of Bungie, and this was by a couple of $100 million, although, as other folks have pointed out, that's kind of a drop in the ocean against the $3.6 billion which they bought Bungie for, and even then in the current state of things, that means that Sony must still be valuing Bungie at $3.4 billion, which is absolutely wild, especially in the context against what most people would actually say about Bungie right now, looking at player numbers for Destiny and all that, and the potential outlook for Marathon. Obviously from the outside it's pretty hard for us to get a sense of how things are looking, but it's still overall a pretty high valuation. I guess another component of it is that Sony won't necessarily want to scare their investors with Marathon still coming up soon. Maybe that impacts this valuation somehow, I wouldn't really know, but give me any thoughts you may have on it down in the comment section. Finally though, to mention some of the weapon changes Bungie posted in their blog article, there are some perk adjustments and archetype changes in general, but largely this is actually about exotics. So Ace of Spades is getting a buff where they're increasing the damage of the bonus of Momentum Mori from 18 to 30%, as well as increasing the maximum damage of Firefly in PvE from 65 to 100. So Ace of Spades is going to feel pretty good. Otherwise, Hawkmoon gets a PvE damage bonus per stack of paracausal charge. It maxes out at 70% at 8 paracausal charge stacks. Then on the Osteostriga, they're reducing the cooldown of the Poison Burst Final Blow from 4 seconds to 2. Plus they've said that Soros Regime will be able to be special reloaded at will to swap between spinning up and dual speed receiver behaviors. And they've added a new hipfire reticle element that correspond with each firing mode. Plus it will grant special ammo progress when spun up kills are made, and extra heavy ammo progress on dual speed receiver kills while ADSing. So another nice change there. Otherwise, on Revision 0, the Hunter's Trace rounds now create a small damaging shockwave and exhaust targets on impact, which sounds interesting. And on Touch of Malice, they've increased the amount of healing provided by the intrinsic perk, as well as reducing the number of kills needed to trigger the healing in PvE, and activating Charged with Blight will now fire a healing impulse. More raid exotic changes though with Collective Obligation, and they've added a very slow rate of leeching effects off unaffected targets. It gives each effect in order of effectiveness with around a full mag of hits per debuff, so you get Volatile, Weaken, then Suppression, which also charges the leech mode at the same rate. That's an exotic I haven't used for some time, so I'd be curious to check it out, but on Symmetry, it now builds Bolt Charge with 1 stack of Dynamic Charge in alternate firing mode, and it grants more stacks at 10 times Dynamic Charge. Plus we can now spend Bolt Charge with 1 stack of Dynamic Charge in alt mode, and they've increased the base reload stat by 20. Still Hunt gets a juicy buff, so they're increasing the Golden Gun damage while using Celestial Nighthawk by 40%. That definitely puts it back on the map, plus they're allowing Sniper's Meditation to buff Still Hunt's Golden Gun shots. So with those two together, I think Still Hunt's going to be pretty meta. Otherwise, on Witherhoard, they've reduced the Silent Alarm auto load time from 3.5 seconds to 2. Not as significant of a buff as I'd maybe hoped for, but still it's going to be worth trying out. On Duality though, they're reducing the hipfire spread by 6%, and on Chaperone, they've actually changed the weapon to use the rapid fire slug frame damage and rate of fire profile, so it could feel a bit different there. But for the final few, on Ruinous Effigy, the Catalyst now grants a 30% damage buff to trace rifles when killing anything in the Transmutation Orb, or damaging a mini-boss or champion with a Transmutation Orb. On Izunagi's Burden, the special reload once again scales with the reload speed stat. Then for Deathbringer, they've reduced the spread of the secondary cluster munitions after they're created. Plus for Black Talon, the heavy attack now suppresses on hits, and if a target's already suppressed, it spreads to nearby targets. Plus for the Catalyst, on hit it gives a 10% boost per void debuff on the target for 2 seconds. They've also reduced the heavy attack cost to 3 ammo from 4, added the Duelist's Trance trait, and increased the max reserve ammo, so Black Talon's got a fairly good buff there, I think. They've also buffed Worldline 0, so they fixed the problem where Tesseract was only hitting 1 instance of damage instead of the usual 5, plus they've increased the damage instances via Tesseract from 5 to 7, so it's a 40% damage increase, and they've reduced the time between the instances from 0.66 seconds to 0.44. They also fixed the problem where chaining Tesseract was inconsistent, and reduced the cost of chain Tesseract blinks from 20% to 10% sword energy. Last one though is for Wolfsbane, and they've increased the damage of the light attack by 8.5%, which brings it closer to Lament or aggressive swords. They've also increased the nano assault duration from 10 to 12 seconds, increased the swarm nado damage by 20%. And there's some additional tuning to the axe handles, which increase damage resistance by 5% and damage resistance linger time from 3 seconds to 5 seconds. So that's a pretty good buff for Wolfsbane, given that it's already fairly strong. So those are the exotic changes coming up in Renegades. Of course, on top of that, we'll get new exotics, new weapons, and everything else. And as always, I will keep you posted when Bungie give us details on abilities. But for today, that's what we have to round up. So as always, I hope you found the video interesting. And if you have, a rating very much helps us out. Also be sure to get subscribed and I'll keep you up to date with everything related to the game. But otherwise, I appreciate you tuning in today. Share your thoughts on anything we've discussed in the comment section. And for now, I hope you guys have an awesome day.